Hi, my name is Joe. I am 66 years old. In 1990, I experienced the loss of a child, and that's what started me on my journey with the pro-life movement. I am a Christian. I have been all my life, and I was very much a pro-life person. But until I experienced the loss myself, it didn't seem as real to me. It started when I was 5 months pregnant and I lost a baby. And as I talked with a friend of mine who worked for the pro-life ministry in Oxford, I wanted to do something that would make a difference, that would help other people. So I became involved in the pregnancy care center in Oxford. I started as a volunteer, just washing baby clothes, folding them, put them in the closet. Then I moved on to become a counselor. And during that time of my life, I began helping the then director a lot because he wasn't able to be in town often, and moved into the role of assistant director. And that's how I got my start in the pro-life movement. It was New Year's Eve, December 31st, 1990, and my baby kicked for the last time. I kept my normal doctor's appointment in January, at which time they did an ultrasound that showed that there was no life present in the baby. It was a strange experience because typically when you look at a live child, it glows with life, and my ultrasound was totally black. The doctor began to tell me everything I would have to do to go through the procedure to remove this fetus. Very cold and impersonal. I went through a lot of distress because I was devastated at the loss of a child. I went through the procedure in Cincinnati. The nurses and the chaplain that dealt with me were not trained to deal with this sort of grief. At one time I was laying in my hospital room and they carried an ice cream size bucket through my room with something in it that looked like it was my baby. And that's how my baby was treated. The chaplain said to me, "Men don't know how to deal with this thing very well, so don't be discouraged if you can't talk about it." Wow, that was an understatement. That experience later had a very big influence on something I participated in. But through that experience, I became very aware that until you experience something yourself, oftentimes it's hard to empathize with somebody who's gone through something. Though it's not impossible, because everyone suffers some sort of grief at some time in some way. And though we may not have the same kind of experience, we can relate to others when there's hurt and pain involved. So I would say to anyone who maybe has not experienced an abortion, if you think you want to work with an organization, go for it, because there may be someone that God just has you right there at that moment to speak to their heart in a way that nobody else can. My experience led me to get involved with a group. It was called Healing Hearts. And my pastor and his wife had experienced the loss of a child, and they knew I had. So they started this group. They helped me to go to this bereavement training class through Resolve Through Sharing, which still is very active. You can still take their classes today. And we started a group that helped people resolve some of their issues with the grief they experienced. We went so far as to have a memorial service. We were issued certificates in honor of our children that we lost, and it enabled closure for a lot of people. Being able to put a face on this child, to give a name, helps deal with the grief. My daughter, my youngest daughter, boohooed through the whole thing because she was so sad thinking about this sister that she never got to meet. My baby's name was Sarah Elizabeth. And now my daughter that was born afterwards, I had a lot of difficulty with pregnancy, and it was because of the procedure that they did. I remember hearing the suction. I remember all of that. So when I hear stories of women talking about their abortions, I can identify with some of that. The thing for me was, it was not abortion, but it was billed as an abortion. I received a hospital bill that said in big letters, abortion, and I was furious. I called my doctors and I said, why is this billed as an abortion? That's just the code we use. I said, well, I did not have an abortion. I didn't have a choice in this. And I thought about that as bad as I felt, as devastated as I was, having to go through that, not making that choice and dealing with the loss of a child, how horrible must someone feel who makes that choice to end the life of their child? So that's why I got involved with the pro-life movement. I'm not as active now as I was. A lot of different things took place. I did work for Elizabeth New Life Center in Dayton, Ohio, when my mother-in-law had a stroke. I had to stop and help take care of her. I did work with another pregnancy care center in Dayton, but I wasn't able to stay there very long. And I have found, when I worked with a drug abuse group, that there were people there that the reason they had gotten involved in their addiction was results of an abortion at some point in time in their life. One young lady that we dealt with in the addiction group continued to get involved in relationships where she was just mistreated and not valued. And I believe that caused her to feel a sense of no value for herself. So why would she expect anyone else to value her? It's a vicious cycle. You know, you have to break that cycle and create and help create in a person a sense of self-worth. And that only, to me, comes with a relationship with Christ. The world's not going to give you anything to give you a sense of self-worth. You have to find that in Christ. In the years that I started, would be in the early 90s, there were more people who felt a sense of guilt to even consider it. You know, they felt it's wrong. Now it's considered a means of birth control. There's not the guilt that people used to feel. Society is more accepting. Even our government, you know, people protesting, wanting to have that right. It's a woman's right to control her body. It's a woman's right to kill the baby. My thought is, what about the baby? That's the baby's right. You know, that's a human being. If someone was guilty of murdering a woman who was pregnant, that would be 2 murders. But yet it's okay for a mother to murder her child. I'm not sure where the shift came about, where the morals changed. It came slowly at first, but I think it has accelerated in more recent years. I think the church has failed in many ways because there are many churches who don't believe abortion's wrong. It's just become more and more accepted. Living in a college town, I would see a lot of girls who would come in, and this is the early 90s, that were from churches in this town who were seeking these free pregnancy tests so they would know whether or not they need to get an abortion. It wasn't that it was even a question in their mind. They just wanted the free services. Now, one thing I can tell you we never did was we never showed gory pictures of this is what goes on during an abortion. We gave people all the options so that they could make an informed choice. We didn't try to force anything down anybody's throat. That it was up to them. It was their choice, their decision. Unlike what I've heard from other agencies that are not church-based agencies. They were more or less told, well, this is what you're going to do because you're young. You don't need this pregnancy. This is what you need to do. So values have changed drastically. Society has changed drastically. And it breaks my heart. I see so many changes occurring so fast in the last 2 years. I just see so many people who are so misinformed. And our society is just pushing the wrong agenda and making what's wrong appear to be right. And it's a deadly thing to do. And as we progress further in time, it's happening faster and faster. This necklace was part of my healing process through the resolve through sharing. Each child represents one of my children. I have 4 living children and 1 little girl that's in heaven. And it was just little things like that that make them seem real, that keep it real. I have a bracelet on that says Mom. Or if you turn it upside down, it says wow. Either way is good. So just, I think when you try to pretend nothing happened or something's non-existent, it was real hard for my husband at the time. He just pretended like nothing happened. He was relieved to not have another child. Years later, he did say to me that he was sorry he didn't deal with things better. But at that time, the mindset he was in, that was how he felt to deal with it. I have to wonder sometimes if some of these young ladies that we counseled with, just if they step back a little bit and think about it a little bit more, if they wouldn't make some of the decisions they make. I think biggest thing is feeling a lack of support to do the right thing. When they're hearing society tell them it's much easier just to get rid of it and forget about it. You will never forget about it. During my time at the Pregnancy Care Center, there were some situations where people would come in and they really were scared. They didn't know what they were going to do. One young lady was in her early 20s and said her mother would kill her if she went home and told her she was pregnant. She was terrified to tell her mother she was pregnant. I seriously doubt, because I knew her mother, she wouldn't kill her. It might be hard at first, but she would get used to the idea, and I think her mother would have supported her. But then there were other cases that there was no change in their mind. They had their mind made up. They were going to get an abortion. They were going to do it. Like I said, they would come, want their free tests. They would listen to us, jabber on, yada, yada, yada. But we knew what they were going to do. There were some cases, however, though, where they chose not to go through with the abortion. They kept the babies, and the Pregnancy Care Center actually has resources for them, training they can take to earn car seats. You know, they can come and get formula. They can get diapers if they need it. There's assistance for people. So on the other side, dealing with people who've had abortion, sometimes there's a deep-rooted anger. Angry at themselves, angry at someone else because they talked them into doing something they really didn't want to do. Angry that there are people they feel like in society, a lot of times church people, who look down on them, and just, for instance, the people who've said they've gone to abortion clinics and Christians were outside protesting, shouting angrily at them. Okay, that's inappropriate. We should never just shout angry things at people because we don't agree with the choices they're making. How is that showing love? How is that showing God's love? Why would they want to change their opinion about anything if you're not showing them love? There has to be something that makes people want to change, that makes them want something different, that makes them want to have hope. And I think that's one of the biggest things I see in people who have had abortions. They feel shame, they feel discouraged, and they feel a lack of hope. I think they feel like they've failed. And they need to know that God is always there. He is always forgiving. And in his eyes, you're not a failure. Maybe you made a bad choice, but that child is none the worse for it. The child is in heaven. That child is safe and loved. And you will see that child again. You've got to learn to love yourself and forgive yourself. We train up our child from a very young age to understand love and acceptance. None of us are perfect. All of us have made mistakes. And a child should never be so afraid of a parent that they can't come to them and tell them something. I think as parents, oftentimes we overreact. We may be very disappointed in a decision, and we may voice that in the wrong way. A gentle answer turns away wrath, as just be kind, be gentle with our children, understand that they're going to make mistakes. They're kids, and understand that how we respond to them could change the whole course of their life. I always wanted my children to be who they wanted to be. I didn't want my children to feel like they had to grow up to be a certain way, that I would be disappointed in them, not pleased with them. I wanted them to be who they were, who God created them to be, and not who they thought mom and dad wanted them to be. As parents, if we can just approach our children with love and not anger, and think back maybe to how we felt when a parent jumped on us for something. There's always things that we don't know or we don't understand. And it's a good idea to talk to kids, discuss things so that they have an understanding where you're coming from and you understand better where they're coming from. Communication is really, really important. And to just let them know that there's unconditional love. I think the church needs to be more open to helping in situations like that, and be sensitive, first of all. Be an environment that if a young person in your church discovers they're pregnant, be open enough that they feel they can come forth and tell you without being reprimanded, being told they're a horrible person. It's just like with the couple I was talking about earlier that had the 3 children. No one really addressed the issue there. They just no one wanted to say anything. No one wanted to rock the boat. But there are times you have to rock that boat because those children, I've watched some of the behavior between the mom and the dad. Those children are growing up in a dysfunctional situation. And the church, we need to help people become functional. And I guess it goes back again to unconditional love. If you have a congregation that is loving toward people and not judgmental, a situation where children feel like they can come in and tell you everything and you're not going to go ballistic and lose your cool. And that's hard to do sometimes. It really is. But you have to look ahead. 30 years ago, where my kids were. Fast forward, all the things that have changed in society. Would I have reacted a little bit different to some things with the hindsight I have now? Yeah. I would have maybe handled things a little differently. But we've got to just realize everything we do has consequences. And it can be either a good one or a bad one. And everything we do affects somebody, somewhere, at some time. So how we train our children is how they're going to train their children. If we show unconditional love, we make it a situation where they can come in and talk to us about what's going on in their life, what they're getting involved in. And parents need to be aware and address things. If you see your daughter who's 13 going out and staying out till midnight, there's an issue. Look at who she's hanging around with. Don't be surprised if she comes in pregnant, if she's staying out all hours of the night and associating with people she shouldn't be associating with. Be aware of what's going on. Don't ignore your family. Have good family time together. Make good memories. There's so many things that we can do as a church. Have the doors open to where the kids can come in. Have game room where the kids can come there for entertainment if they need to. Just the church needs to be more the center of the family. And families have become so detached. Everybody's busy. Everybody's working, going off their own way. It's no wonder that kids are getting involved in the things they are. They're looking to their peers for advice, not their parents or the senior saints at church. And that's something that's changed in society. And it's a big contributor to a lot of the things we see. If I had a 13-year-old, 14-year-old come to me and say, I'm pregnant and I am scared to death to tell my parents, the first thing I'd do is pray with her and let her know that God loves her and he is in control of this situation if she will allow him to be. That he will make a way for her where there seems to be no way. And if she needs the moral support of someone to go with her, I will go with her. I will help her. There's so many challenges that she's going to face, but she doesn't need to be alone. She needs her church family. She needs friends to rally around her. And that's where the church needs to step up and take an active part in a young lady's life. It may mean taking someone into your home for a little while. It may mean running intercession between the child and the parents, whatever it takes. But God will make a way, and he will give you the strength to do whatever you have to do. If I were 15 years old and I found myself in a situation where I was pregnant, the first thing I would do is not panic. I would look up a Christian organization, which are many in many cities, a pregnancy care center that I could go to, take a test, confirm that it truly is a pregnancy. Many of them have medical facilities now that do ultrasound and all different sort of things. I would meet with a counselor and find out exactly what resources are available to me in the area that I'm in and what options I have. Abortion does not have to be the only option. There are a lot of people who would be more than happy to adopt a baby that another person could not care for at that time. Absolutely stay away from Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood is going to tell you that you're young, you still are in school, you don't have finances to raise a child, and the best thing for you is just to eliminate this life and move on with your life like nothing's ever happened. And that is the biggest lie you'll ever hear. An abortion is something you'll live with for the rest of your life. You will never forget that child, no matter how much you try. It'll always be buried there in your mind that you experienced this. In my training as a bereavement counselor, we were told that when you bury something alive, it'll always resurface. As much as you try to convince yourself that it's just a blob of cells, it's not a person, that's a lie. You will always remember this child, but you don't need to feel guilt for the rest of your life if you have had an abortion. God can bring healing to your heart and your mind, and that child is safe with him. If you choose adoption, there's many choices. You can have an open adoption where you could know the parents, or it could be a closed adoption where no information is given until that child is old enough and can seek records. Whatever you do, talk to somebody who's going to give you some good advice, somebody who's going to look at things from a spiritual point of view, because the world will lie to you. The world will lead you down a path of destruction, because that's how the enemy is. He comes to kill, steal, and destroy. But Jesus came that you might have life and have it more abundantly. Something that really bothered me, though, when I was expecting the baby that died, was my husband's reaction when I told him the baby had died. Just sat down and was like, it's a load off of him, you know. And that was very hurtful. He did not want another child, and he was very relieved. Then, you know, like a year later, we have another daughter, and she was a month premature. Because of the procedure I had done after the death of the baby, it altered the shape of my uterus, and she could not be born natural way. She was breached. I had lost amniotic fluid. They thought there was a problem with her heart. I had to have an emergency C-section. And when I was laying there, I could wiggle my feet. And I asked the doctor, should I be able to move my feet? Because I'm just wiggling my feet around. They're like, oh, no. They gave me something in my IV to finish numbing me, but it made me extremely ill. Well, that daddy had to hold that baby. And he held her for hours. He sat in the nursery rocking her. And I think it really hit him at that time what he had missed with this other child. And it was after that he apologized to me for his reaction. And I just wonder how many fathers of aborted babies think about the relationship they might have had with that child. They might have been able to take them hunting or fishing. They might have been able to take them to the daddy-daughter dances, things that they never get to experience because they chose abortion. They thought at the time that was the best thing to do. But I wonder how many, in retrospect, think, I wish I hadn't done that. And there may be a lot of men with a lot of hurt who have never voiced that hurt because they didn't know how to. And I think that's one area that the abortion centers, they don't really address the father. I mean, they just get this woman in and out. And the pregnancy care centers, I know when I worked there, did not really address the father. And I think that's something that we need to pick up and deal with. I think the church needs to deal with that.